Okay. So hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Brianna Maher. I am from the Suicide Prevention Center of New York with the New York State Office of Mental Health. And I'm here to talk to you about a couple of resources that we've made available through our partnership with SUNY. I first want to acknowledge that many of us may have had experiences with suicide, either on a personal level, or we may have known someone who unfortunately died by suicide. And this is an important topic for college students because we know that suicide is the second leading cause of death for college-aged people. And now more than ever, student leaders are really positioned to be able to recognize when a fellow student may be struggling with their mental health or even having thoughts of suicide. So for this reason and many other reasons, we partnered with SUNY to be able to provide a free online 1-hour gatekeeper training. And that training is called Question, Persuade, Refer, or QPR. So similarly to CPR training, how that teaches people to respond in a medical emergency, QPR teaches people how to respond to a suicide concern or a suicide crisis. So we're hoping that as student leaders, you'll be able to help us promote this training so that it can increase students' self-efficacy and ability to respond to students who may be at risk for suicide. And I know, for speaking for myself, I was a college student almost a year ago, and I know that students are taking a lot of trainings and answering a lot of surveys. But I felt that this training, I really left with skills that I could apply to not only my professional career, but also my everyday personal life. It really taught me more, gave me more awareness of the issue and just general communication skills about how to talk to someone about this. So I'm going to just briefly talk about what the training will go. The training will go over like some background about suicide and the scope of the problem. It'll also teach you how to recognize warning signs, whether it's a direct verbal cue that someone might be showing you, or if it's a direct cue, maybe like a vague statement that someone might make, how to recognize those signs and take them seriously. And then it'll also teach you how to ask the question about suicide. And we know that asking someone about suicide won't put the thought into their head. It actually can be very helpful for people who are thinking about suicide. It can relieve a lot of pain that they may have been dealing with and open up a door for conversation. It'll also teach you techniques for listening and discussing this in a way that will encourage someone to seek help about this. And it'll also make you aware of just general resources for suicide prevention and other resources for mental health that you can take advantage of and that you can also refer someone to. Another service that we wanted to highlight during this time is crisis text. So crisis text is an anonymous free texting service that anyone can use, and it's available 24/7 to anyone in North America and even some parts of Europe and New Zealand. And college students can text Got5U, and we'll put this in the chat box as well, to 741-741. And this will get you connected to a trained counselor. And this service can be used for not only suicide or mental health concerns, but really any kind of emotional pain or difficult experience that someone may be going through that they just need extra support around. And so given the current state with quarantining and social isolation and all this talk about physical health, we really want to emphasize the importance of mental health and using these available services that we have right now. So we encourage you to take advantage of these for yourselves and also encourage your fellow classmates to take advantage of these services as well, so that we can really make a difference during this time where people might be struggling more with their mental health and maybe not paying enough attention to it. And then, so if anyone has any questions about this, we'd like to open up for questions about the QPR training or about crisis text. I believe you can use the chat box.
Great. While we're wrapping questions, I wanted to highlight a couple ways of accessing these resources because I think people may have seen some of this and other folks maybe haven't. First, there's messaging circulating right now that includes a letter from the chancellor. It includes registration information for QPR, as well as the link to the file to download the crisis text line marketing materials. So that is being circulated by email. If you haven't received it yet, you should in the coming days. That's going along with the press release that either came out today or will be coming out very shortly, that is a joint message from the Office of Mental Health and SUNY highlighting this partnership and all the great work that we're doing. But longer term, we know that searching in your email box is kind of a challenge. So SUNY is actually going to be launching, hopefully this month, a mental health specific page that will have all of this information, guidance documents, references, resources, the links and instructions for registering for this, as well as longer term, we think about great work that's happening on campus. We want to make sure to highlight all of the good stuff that campuses are doing and translating that across the system. So that page, as soon as it launches, we'll be sending out very widely. We look forward to the leadership on each campus helping to promote that, and that includes the folks that are on this webinar. So I wanted to highlight the access information. If people haven't seen it yet, you should be seeing it very shortly. Taryn, do we have any questions?
Not just yet.
Okay. Brit, you are a trainer for QPR. Can you talk a little bit about some of the content, some of the opportunities, and even things like role modeling? What happens in the training itself?
Yeah, so typically in the online training, there is an opportunity for role play, but in the in-person training there is. But online, it'll walk you through just some general kind of like background and data about suicide to give you kind of a baseline understanding of the problem. And then it'll go through indirect, direct, nonverbal warning signs and cues that someone may be exhibiting, and how to respond to that, how to actively listen to that person in a way that will help them feel understood and validate their feelings. And then it'll talk about how to refer that person to get help and what available resources there are. And also on the training page, there will be a page specifically for resources. So if you need more information about resources, you can click on that page and it'll show the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, crisis text numbers, the New York State COVID Emotional Helpline, some other resources such as Headspace, which was made available to New York, and the Suicide Prevention Resource Center and other resources like that.
Can I ask you a question as a public health person, fellow public health person? What do you think is important from a public health standpoint as we think about suicide prevention? Because we certainly have great clinical expertise in our counseling centers, but I'd love to hear what your vision for a public health approach for suicide prevention specific to college is about.
Yeah, I think that really it comes down to the fact that suicide isn't just a problem for counseling or for even health centers. Suicide is really a problem that affects everyone. It affects every kind of sector of colleges, every business, and even any major really that college can have. So I think it's really about acknowledging that and creating like cross-system collaboration for this kind of effort to do suicide prevention jointly with health centers and counseling centers, and also just people who aren't in the health field or in the public health field. We definitely need those that input and those perspectives in suicide prevention.
That's awesome. And finally, I don't mean to keep interviewing you, but it's such a great opportunity to have OMH support and engagement. So taking advantage as much as possible. Yeah. You've done some great work with Dr. Harris on help-seeking behavior among college students, graduate students. Can you talk a little bit about that project? Because I think one of the challenges that we see in mental health promotion and suicide prevention is that often folks who are in distress may not already have a clinical relationship established. So I'd love to hear about that project that I know is ongoing. And we've talked a little bit about next steps that we'll certainly engage SUNY on.
Yes. Yeah, so we've been doing like qualitative focus groups with students. We've done a focus group with general undergrad students at the University of Albany. public health graduate students, LGBTQ plus students, and female student athletes. And the point of this focus group was really to hear directly from the students about what would make them more or less likely to utilize counseling services, to utilize these suicide specific resources like the Lifeline or crisis text, and what might hinder them, what might stop them from using them. And we've really learned a lot, like definitely how we're marketing and promoting these services can be changed based on feedback that we've gotten. Just general awareness about what the colleges can offer. A lot of times students don't even really understand that. And also what other services can be provided besides just traditional counseling. We know that for some schools, it's very difficult to get in a quick time to get talk to a counselor. But there are other things that we can implement, such as support groups or student hotlines, that will also give other opportunities for people who may not be comfortable with traditional counseling.
Awesome. So we have our first question from the audience. I have some thoughts, and then I'd love your thoughts as well. First, what do you think are the most effective ways leaders of student governments and other student leadership organizations can support mental health initiatives and participate in mental health advocacy? Let's start with that. I want to address a couple of things, and I think there's some very concrete ways that as part of the leadership of a campus community, there is an opportunity for you to be modeling effective behavior and support. So let's kind of start at a macro level. Even the role of being a student leader means that students can feel connected to clubs in the campus, and that's a large part of what you're doing. You're fostering connections, and that is incredibly protective for mental health. We know there are a lot of health outcomes that are affected by connection, and you're helping positive health outcomes. Being an advocate for a caring campus community is essential here. We all know of campuses nationally and in New York State that have suffered from divisive language and actions that marginalize and denigrate students. So your support and celebration of an inclusive campus culture is also promoting mental health tangentially. Looking for opportunities related to advocacy, Student Assembly has been integral in terms of continuing funding for mental health. So I would encourage you as much as possible, if there are opportunities for you to travel to Albany or nationally to represent organizations that seek mental health support. I'm part of the Safe States Alliance and did a policy fellowship. And one of the things that I did in my policy fellowship was actually educating lawmakers about mental health on college campuses and why it is so important to continue to support that financially. It was very much an educational opportunity. They hadn't seen a lot of the work and what it looks like. So if there are similar chances for you to come from campus to the state capitol, certainly seek those out. And finally, modeling good behavior. You know, sometimes we use the word crazy to describe something that's bad. That's not intentionally hurtful, but it can hurt somebody's feelings if you're stigmatizing mental health. So look for ways to model positive behavior, inclusiveness, and to destigmatize mental health. Bree, what do you think?
I definitely agree with all of that. And the language is really so important, especially when we're talking about suicide. For example, it's not best practice to say committed suicide. We say that that person died by suicide, because that takes away the kind of criminal aspect of that language. So things like that, and definitely modeling good behavior, just being available and being a resource to the students that you work with, and also just treating them, I guess, in a way that you would want to be treated. Really, that always impacts people's mental health. And also for like advocacy and getting involved, I really encourage students to get involved with local organizations who are doing this work. They can always use students' voices, students' help in this work. So like the AFSP, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, they have local chapters throughout the state. Also our organization, we are always looking to work with students and engage students in our especially our college work. Some other organizations like the Mental Health Association of New York State, different things like that.
That's a really great point, that I think sometimes there's so many opportunities, it can be challenging to know which exactly are available to which people. So I think that's something, an action item for my office, to make sure that we're promoting those opportunities to students often early, and putting them out there. It's also, we sometimes see a lack of diversity in the kinds of students that are participating in some of these organizations like Active Minds. And so I think there is an opportunity to be deliberately inclusive and to really foster outside of some of the helping professions and say, let's get business majors involved. Let's get some of the biology majors involved and think about how we're reflecting all voices and all needs. So I think that's something that I look forward to working with student leadership about. I also wanted to talk a little bit about, and I'd love your thought here, Bree, the conversation around suicide can be a little bit challenging. Part of QPR training is modeling how to have that conversation effectively. There is a pretty fun resource called Seize the Awkward that talks about those awkward conversations, but they're positive. It's a positive opportunity to seize the awkward. And so I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that modeling experience with QPR. Like, what are some things you'd offer to somebody when having that conversation as a starting point?
Yeah, I think just being able to open up and even say those words is really a first great step. Just being able to say to someone like, hey, I've noticed you've been like really down. Are you like dealing with some mental health concerns? Are you feeling suicidal? Just starting that will really open the door for someone. And most people are struggling with suicide for a really long time before they even are able to talk about it. So I think not being afraid to take that step is really so important. And it's really all that's initially needed is just to make that first step, to ask that question and to open that door to that conversation. And I think encouraging, like you were saying, diverse students and diverse backgrounds to get involved in this work. A lot of students do feel passionately about this, but they don't know where to channel that. They don't know how to take what they've dealt with in their own life and put that into to have a positive impact in their community. So sometimes they just need some kind of encouragement to be able to do that and move forward and help other people.
Awesome. We have a question here. Do you recommend students reach out to campus level resources or SUNY level resources first? Does it matter? I would say that it's very situational. If you've got somebody who is seeking, let's even say not clinical counseling, but mental health support and supportive strategies. A lot of campuses have things like wellness coaching that is not counseling, but is available either through the health center or the counseling center that may be great for somebody who is, say, struggling with stress management, but doesn't feel like they need a counseling relationship. For somebody that is in acute crisis, a lot of the national resources may be easier to reach in the middle of the night. So I think start with your campus, but also start with the situation and use that as your starting point. Something that I think we're hearing a little bit, and I'd love to hear this in the chat if it's true. I think some students are overwhelmed with resources, just there's a lot of information being pushed out. And so something that may be helpful, and I'm happy to do this on our page when it launches, is to talk about the sort of the level of emergency for each of the kinds of resources. I mean, crisis text line is really designed for folks that are in distress. It is not a lower level engagement, but there are a lot of other places where you can have somebody who is distressed but is not in an emergency having that kind of engagement. So I think start by understanding the situation and go from there. Bree, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And also the resources that we put on the QPR page, we made sure that they were resources that anyone can utilize so that it's not like one school and another school won't be able to access it. So the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, Crisis Text, other resources that we put on there, they're definitely available to anyone, college students and college professionals themselves.
That is a great point. So question about pre-existing conditions. What kind of pre-existing mental health concerns can be stressed by a situation like this? How can we look out for our friends with those pre-existing concerns? Great question. I'm going to say there's a few things we're hearing from our counseling centers and from our students. Students are feeling isolated, and that is often contributing to depression. So for somebody that has depression, having that lack of connection is possibly exacerbating those mental health concerns. For somebody that has anxiety, not knowing what's happening. And I think for a lot of us right now, we don't know what tomorrow or next month is going to look like. So I can certainly understand if somebody has anxiety, having a situation where they have almost no control at a macro level can exacerbate those conditions. So I think I keep coming back to connection because it's one of the best things we can do for each other right now is to reach out. I think some of us are getting Zoom fatigue. So look for things like even old-fashioned cards in the mail, How are you supporting folks? How are you maintaining those connections with people in your squad, and make sure that you're looking for ways to stay fresh with that. Um, and be honest about your emotions. I mean, I find myself saying I love you more to my family just because I think we're all sort of stressed out and overwhelmed. And so it's an easy way to make somebody remember that you care about them. It's an easy way to make somebody feel important. Bree, what do you think?
Yes, definitely. And I think at least for suicide and people who may be more at risk for suicide during this time, we know that people who are experiencing depression, or maybe they've had a loss in their life, either a death or a loss of a relationship, those are definitely people we should be reaching out to, looking out for. And I know it can be, a lot of people don't feel comfortable reaching out when something like this happens. They don't really know what to say, but just saying anything can be really helpful for someone, even just acknowledging what happened and to say, hey, I'm here for you if you need anything. That can be really affirming for someone to just know that someone else is there for them if they need them. So definitely don't be afraid to reach out and make that connection.
That's awesome advice. I would also say sometimes having any victories in a day can be really helpful in a situation like this. Finishing one paper, doing one engagement strategy. If you're graduating, talking to the professional development office and making sure that your resume looks awesome. So those kind of strategies that maybe have nothing to do with mental health on the surface are going to help promote healthy overall wellness, as opposed to it's not just about your physical health. Thinking about things that are tangential to your mental health is important too. Another question, as a student leader, we are constantly busy and always going. Do you have any tips for us in maintaining mental health? Yes, definitely. um, let Bree start with this one.
Yeah, so I think that this one is definitely more on an individual level. And I think maintaining your mental health and coping strategies really depends on what you like to do. But I know, like, for a lot of people, a lot of people do like journaling, and just even just writing down like 3 things that you're thankful for every day can really change the way your brain looks at life, the way it's working to think more positively. And also definitely get outside as much as you can. Just being around in nature, there have been studies done that just being around green and plants can have an impact on your mental health. And think about what works for you. Maybe you're not a yoga person. Maybe you can't really get into meditating, but maybe I like to go running, or maybe I like to play with my dog more, or call my mom every now and then. Figure out what works for you, and like keep a kind of a storage package of all those different things that you can go back to when you're really feeling stressed and really down.
That's awesome. I would say that so physical exercise we know is effective in terms of treating mild depression in conjunction with other strategies. So thinking about exercise as part of your overall mental health strategies may be effective for some folks. I would also add saying no. Learning how to say no is a huge part, I think, of maintaining effective mental health, especially for folks that are as busy as student leaders. I think it's hard for folks sometimes to say no, and I'm one of these people who volunteers for things, even when I'm already overextended. And so, in terms of heading off a problem before it becomes a major problem, it took me a long time to be able to say, I can't do this right now. I can do this by the end of the week, or basically triaging stuff as soon as possible, as opposed to saying yes to everything, getting overwhelmed and not accomplishing my goals. So I think from a time management standpoint, those kind of strategies will help stay healthy, stay engaged. Be reminded of the passion, the things that you got involved with for the first time and you were so excited about them. So I think I'm lucky in that my job is something I'm passionate about. I get to work in a field that I deeply believe in. So if there are similar kind of things in terms of the activities, in terms of the academics, those passion projects will keep you engaged when you're beyond. So finding ways to re-engage with that passion is often super helpful for me. So I think that's the end of the questions at this point. I wanted to talk a little bit about a couple other initiatives, but I also wanted to make sure if there were any other questions for Bree, because I'm always available. This is a special treat to have Bree and OMATE with us. So I think we're still up to date. Bree, can you talk a little bit about the crisis text line marketing materials? Because the work that's been done on that, the new versions of those that have the keyword, there are some concepts like isolation that really come through in those. I wanted you to talk about how they were customized and how they're going to be, in your vision, how they will be used.
Yeah, and with those, we really kind of wanted to give like a starting point for schools to be able to promote this. We definitely encourage colleges and students to even come up with their own marketing materials. We're not aware of all the different cultures in the different colleges. So having like student and consumer driven marketing will really be helpful in promoting crisis texts and making people more engaged with it. But behind that, we, in the past, suicide prevention and help seeking awareness has really a lot of times focused on kind of like sad and traumatized looking things that make other people feel sad. But we know that that isn't really helpful. We know that that isn't effective. So with these new materials, we really wanted to promote people to be able to look at these materials and say, okay, I could see myself using that. That doesn't make me feel more sad. It makes me feel like I feel empowered to take that step and seek help. So that's definitely what we encourage. But any kind of marketing material that you want to do around help seeking and mental health awareness should really be strength based and promoting strengths and help seeking and not as much like sad and shocking images kind of a thing.
Yeah, the gains framed approach is something that I deeply believe in. We have an opportunity to collaborate, to connect, and those things are so important as we keep people connected, to keep them safe. And it sounds like that's exactly the philosophy that was used to customize these. So we're actually going to have to finish up in the next few seconds. My name is Leah Wentworth. I am the Director of Student Wellness for the SUNY system. I serve you, so if there's anything I can ever do, please reach out. I'm always happy to talk to students. Bree, do you want to say goodbye?
Yes, and again, I'm Brianna Maher. I'm a public health implementation specialist with the Suicide Prevention Center of New York and the Office of Mental Health. And I am definitely fully engaged in all of this college work. I really think it's so important. So of course, always feel free to reach out to me as well. Leah has my contact information. So thank you, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you again for listening. Please let us know if you have any questions.